Australian Open draw points to Aryna Sabalenka versus Amanda Anisimova rematch. The US Open finalists got favorable draws down under. We could be headed for a second consecutive Grand Slam final between Aryna Sabalenka and Amanda Anisimova. Sabalenka, the number 1 seed, and Anisimova, the number 4 seed, have favorable draws for the late stages of the 2026 Australian Open, which gets underway January 17 in Melbourne. Sabalenka, the 2025 runner-up down under to Madison Keys, would be a solid favorite against likely round of 16 opponent Clara Tauson and probable quarterfinal foe Jasmine Paolini. Anisimova has more weapons than anyone in her quarter of the draw. She could face number 2 seed Iga Swiatek in the semifinals, but proved she could beat Swiatek on a hard court at the 2025 US Open. It could add up to a rematch of the US Open final between Sabalenka and Anisimova this past September, which Sabalenka won in 2 close sets. Who got the toughest and easiest draws for the Australian Open? Toughest draw for a top seed. There won't be any easy matches for Mira Andreeva, the number 8 seed. Andreeva will likely face solid veterans Donna Vekic and Maria Sakkari in her first 2 matches before taking on a seeded player in the later rounds. Best draw for Week 1. Number 12 seed Clara Tauson faces a challenging, likely matchup against number 17 seed Victoria Mboko in the 3rd round and an even more challenging likely matchup against top seed Sabalenka in the round of 16, but she has a fairly smooth path to the 3rd round. Tauson won't face anyone ranked better than number 93 in her first 2 matches. Worst draw. World number 103 Anastasia Zakharova drew number 6 seed Jessica Pegula in the 1st round. It wouldn't get much easier from there. If Zakharova somehow won the tournament, she'd most likely have to beat 6-seeded players, and no one ranked worse than number 36. Best opportunity for an unseeded player. World number 43 Sinew Wang has momentum after reaching the final in the recent ASB Classic in New Zealand and the draw to back it up in Australia. She'll face a qualifier in the 1st round. The likely 2nd-round opponent, number 24 seed Yelena Ostapenko, is talented but inconsistent. A rematch written in the draw, Sabalenka versus Anisimova at the Australian Open. The Australian Open draw is often treated like a spreadsheet of probabilities, a lattice of seeds and sections, a careful mathematics of who might collide with whom beneath the brutal sun of Melbourne. But every so often, the draw reads less like numbers and more like narrative. This year, the possibility of an Aryna Sabalenka versus Amanda Anisimova rematch feels exactly like that, a story waiting for its cue, tucked between hard-court lines and first-ball tosses. At Melbourne Park, history does not whisper. It echoes. The courts remember power and pain, collapse and coronation. For Sabalenka, the Australian Open has become a personal theater of transformation. Once the embodiment of volatile force, she has evolved into something colder, steadier, and more terrifying for opponents. A champion who can hit through the wind and her own doubts. The draw, when it points her toward Anisimova again, is not simply arranging a match. It is testing the durability of that evolution. Sabalenka enters any Australian Open draw as gravity. The ball comes off her racket with a sound that turns heads on outer courts. Her presence warps sections, making early-round opponents look nervously over their shoulders. Draw analysts circle her name in red ink because she shrinks margins. Against most players, she dictates not just rallies, but the emotional temperature of the match. The heat becomes hers. Yet Anisimova is not most players. If Sabalenka represents force refined, Anisimova embodies timing rediscovered. Her career has never followed a straight line. It has been interrupted, reassembled, and reshaped by absence and return. When she strikes the ball cleanly, the geometry of the court changes. Angles appear where none should exist. The ball skids, accelerates, and arrives early, like a thought you were not prepared to have. A rematch between these two is compelling precisely because it resists simplification. This is not power versus finesse, or experience versus youth. It is power versus precision, yes, but also resilience versus rediscovery. Sabalenka's game asks, "Can you absorb this?" Anisimova's replies, "Can you move again? Can you defend one more impossible angle? can you handle disruption? The Australian Open draw, in this sense, becomes a literary device. It places these two on converging paths through early rounds that test different things. Sabalenka may be asked to survive players who retrieve endlessly, who try to elongate points and frustrate her rhythm. Anisimova may be challenged by veterans who probe her patience, who ask whether her timing holds under pressure. By the time the draw pulls them together, the match is no longer isolated. It is informed by the scars and confidence collected along the way. What makes the rematch shimmer is memory. Sabalenka does not forget losses easily, and she does not forget wins at all. Her tennis is fueled by recall, the moment she steadied her serve, the match she escaped, the point where she decided she would not flinch again. Facing Anisimova again, she would arrive with clarity. High margin when needed. Violence when permitted. Control over chaos. Anisimova's memory works differently. Hers is not about domination but recognition. She remembers what it feels like when her ball lands deep and early, when her opponent's feet freeze for a fraction too long. Against Sabalenka, she knows there are windows. They are small, but they exist. The draw offering her this rematch is an invitation to step through one. Melbourne adds its own character to the contest. The Australian Open is played under extremes, searing afternoons, heavy night air, crowds that swell with noise and expectation. Sabalenka thrives in this environment now. She has learned how to ride the energy without letting it throw her balance. Anisimova, quieter in demeanor, absorbs the atmosphere differently. She listens. She waits. And then, when the moment opens, she strikes. Tactically, the rematch promises contrast rather than novelty. Sabalenka will target the forehand corner relentlessly, daring Anisimova to redirect pace. She will look to shorten points, to prevent rhythm from forming. Anisimova will try to take the ball early, flattening rallies before they tilt too far toward brute force. The margins will be thin. The draw knows this. It always does. But beyond tactics, the draw points to something more intimate. A question of belief. Sabalenka believes she belongs at the summit now. That belief is heavy, but it is also stabilizing. Anisimova believes she belongs back in the conversation. That belief is lighter, more fragile, but dangerously free. A rematch at the Australian Open would not simply determine who advances. It would mark where each player stands in her relationship with pressure. For Sabalenka, it would be about defending territory she has claimed. For Anisimova, it would be about expanding the map again, proving that her best tennis is not a memory but a direction. When the draw is released, fans will scan it for shock and symmetry. They will imagine this match before it exists, rehearsing points in their minds. That is the quiet power of a potential rematch. It turns brackets into anticipation.